Okay, so where were we? Yeah, so let's discuss where we were. Okay. We got a little caught in the weeds in a couple of places, but that's fine. I mean, that's how discussion's going to work. So maybe an overview will help of what I was trying to get out of the text will help everybody. Let me move the text over so you don't like, sorry, the summary over so that you don't see the side of my face. So we were looking at the Maharal. I mean, we'll talk about my little intro about the Mishkan in a second. We were talking about the Maharal and the Maharal on the three pillars on Torah, Avodah, and Gemilas Chasad. Maharal wrote a commentary on Avos, which means early on he's going to deal with these three pillars. He introduces the topic by talking about three kinds of tov that a person's capable of. There's the tov of a person in and of themselves, and he likens this to all the times that Hashem said tov during creation. I think there's 7 times that Hashem says tov in the process of creation, where before anything in creation even does anything, there's an inherent tov to creation, and similarly, a person can be tov in and of themselves. Then there's tov that we possess in relation to our Creator. So that's obeying Hashem, following directions, working within His plan as opposed to against His plan. And then there's the third one, tov that he had was the tov in which we relate to others. And he says these three aspects of tov are
Somebody says he's still in the waiting room.
yeah. These three aspects of tov are correspond to the three, or what the three pillars are describing. So Torah is the epitome of Hashem's wisdom, and therefore the epitome of our route to self-perfection. Avoda usually refers to karbanos. It could also be avoda shebelev, which is tefillah, and that is the epitome of mitzvos beinanam lamakom. And therefore, when we talk about the pillar of avoda, we're talking about the pillar of our relationship with Hakadosh Baruch Hu. And the third, Gemilas Chasadim, is pretty self-evidently tov in how we relate to others. But again, he doesn't. The Maharal makes a point to saying that it's phrased in terms of the epitome. There are numerous mitzvahs beinam lachavero. Gemilas Chasadim is like the archetype of all other mitzvahs beinam lachavero. And I think that resolves, by the way, the question I had last week about Torah. If avoda is called the pillar of avoda because the karbanos, or at least tefillah, is the epitome or the archetype mitzvah for how we relate to Hashem, then he's likening it to Torah, where Torah is not where Torah is the archetype and not necessarily the only way. So that sort of took the edge off. It doesn't fit his words 100%. I'll give you that. Now, what happened with the introduction and where we got into this whole what is the Mishkan thing is that I'm building a case over the course of a number of achronim. I want to build a case that this is what we're supposed to be getting from the from the various kalim in the Mishkan and the Beis HaMikdash, and where they are placed. What they're made out of, not that many other details I've addressed, but those hints, I believe, correspond as well. And we had that little picture. So let me share the screen so I could share the little picture, because doodling takes a while, so I might as well get my mileage. Share screen 1. So there it is. Let me move you people over to next to the screen so I am again can make eye contact without you seeing the side of my face, staring at me in profile. But if we saw this picture, I just enlarged the wrong window. If we saw the picture, right, we had too enlarged. We had 6 kalim. There are 6 kalim in the Mishkan. From the Mizbeach to the, there, that's better. There were 6 kalim in the Mishkan from the Mizbeach to the Aron. Right? From the, that's from the east to the west. And 3 of them have crowns and 3 of them don't. And I was arguing that the 3 crowned kalim also represent these 3 pillars, because the Aron is, has the original, the manuscript Torah in it. It's where Hashem's presence would have been felt when there was a Navi. The community, the relationship between the human being and Hashem is really, that's symbolized by the Aron. The Shulchan has 12 loaves of bread corresponding to 12 Shvatim. I argued that was the pillar of Gemilas Chasadim, where we take care of each other's bodily needs. And therefore, we have the 12 loaves of bread supporting each other. And the golden Mizbeach is Beinanam Lamakom, is in a sense that the other Kalim aren't, because we're sacrificing to God something intangible. And it's entirely removed from this world. Or as much as any act in this world can be removed from this world, it's pretty ethereal, certainly in symbolism. And then I argued that the 3 kalim that we'll get to when we learn the Gra, the menorah, the Mizbeach HaNechoshes, or Mizbeach HaOlah, and the Kior, that's the menorah, the outdoor Mizbeach, and the
Okay.
washing thingy.
Well, he's just started, so.
Why don't I wait on 20 minutes?
All right, but whenever you.
Jonathan,
Okay.
can you mute yourself? Okay.
I muted him. So so those 3 kalim correspond as well. The Mizbeach to the Mizbeach. The Kior, well, we'll leave the Kior for last because that I admit is the shakiest. The menorah to the Aron, both of which are symbols of wisdom and of Torah. And the Kior, which has some connection to physicality because you wash off the dust with the Shulchan. And Jonathan had noted the water and the bread as the 2 staves of life. And there are other ways in which they're connected. But right now, I was just looking at the 3 crowned kalim because we had looked at a Gemara about there being 3 crowns in the Beis HaMikdash, or the Mishkan, the Mizbeach, the Aron, and the Shulchan. Mizbeach was taken by Aron. So Mizbeach was clearly the kind of service that a Kohen is appointed to special. Shulchan was taken by David. The crown that was on the Shulchan became David's crown. Again, that's what is the job of a king, to organize society and to provide social, welfare. And the Aron still sits where it is for anybody who wants to take. And therefore, the Aron apparently is the crown of Torah. And it says that the crown of Torah is necessary as a precondition, as a means to becoming a king. And we saw in the Rambam's version, he quotes 2 psukim, so he accounts for both the king and the 2 halves of the pasuk. Well, 2 adjacent psukim. So Bi Melachim Yimlochu, showing that the king needs to have the crown of Torah, and Bi Sarim Yisoru, to prove that a Kohen needs to have the crown of Torah. The Maharal says something related, because the Maharal talks about how the tov that a person has in and of themselves is a necessary precondition for the tov in how we relate to other people, and the tov in how we relate to Hashem. So that sort of corresponds now to where we're talking about the crowns, that the crown of Torah is necessary for a king to possess even before he becomes king. Similarly, the crown of Torah is necessary for us to possess, even before if we are to really succeed in our relationship with other people. And that's about as far as we got. We got a little caught up in one of his proof texts, but I'm skipping that this time because it doesn't really affect going forward. So now, let's talk about going forward. So far we've talked about the three forms of Tov that that a person possesses. I do not think we got to how that becomes pillars of the world. So that's the next thing that the help me, the Maharal, the word's up there. So I had a hint, even if nobody's speaking up. That's the next thing the Maharal addresses. And now I'm going to explain how these three kinds of human tov, good in a human being, are appropriate to be considered or to be the pillars that the world stands on. When these three things are perfect or whole in a person, tov b'chol gimel b'chinos, say he's good in all three aspects. Asher amarnu, ki ein b'metzios rak Hashem yisbarach. Wow, would a chassid have fun with that one? There is nothing in existence except Hashem. Shehu mechuyev hametzios, because he necessitates other existences. So that first phrase sounds very chassidish, that nothing exists except God. Second phrase sounds like something out of the Rambam, because he is the non-contingent existence and everything else is contingent on Hashem existing. So you could read them either way, which frankly, I have a lot of problems understanding the Maharal because there's a lot of things I think he could be read either way. And that which exists from him. Of course, a person has some relationship to his creator. But Hashem Yisbarach, that Hashem created him, and a person's created from Hashem. It's appropriate that a person guard this relationship. And if a person would, God forbid, not guard this relationship, his existence is for naught. Person is created for his own sake. And if person damages themselves or destroys themselves, and is not thought of, and is not important, perhaps, he's a creature of nothingness, right? Tohu vavohu, and has no substance. This given individual is not alone in the world. Hashem created each person with other people. Therefore, a person has to guard that relationship which he has from with other people. So this is the sentences where I justify what I dumped on you last week and hope no one would ask about why I'm saying that the Maharal phrases this in terms of three relationships. Because he actually uses the word of yachas with yourself. Like last time we talked about shleimus, and through shleimus, you could have a relationship with Hashem and a relationship with other people. Here he uses the word yachas 3 times. He actually describes 3 classes of relationship. Therefore, it says that the world stands on Torah, Avodah, and Gemilas Chasadim. So that's the tripod. Because through the Torah, a person is not a empty or vacuous creature. A person becomes an important creature, a significant being. Yidei avoda, through worship, who shomer hayachas sheish la'adam el baro, person guards their relationship with their creator, shenivra mimenu. Yidei gemilas chasadim, adam yesh lo chibur el shar b'nei adam. And through gemilas chasadim, a person has a connection to other people. Kilo nivra adam b'fnei atzmo klal, a person was not created for themselves, rak im shar b'nei adam, but with other people. Because sher ha'adam oseh chesed im zulaso, when a person does chesed with another, or an other, if we want to revive that conversation, hine yesh lo chibur el zulaso, he has a connection with the other person. B'zeh ha'adam kasher bara Hashem yisbarach, and with this person as Hashem created him. I wanted to point out here, there's an old Musar concept. There's a Rav Yisrael story that is always told about it. There's mention about it in Michtav Meliyahu. The people generally think that you give to those you love, and that's true, right? What he says here is, when a person does chesed im zulaso, when a person does chesed with another, hine yesh lo chibur el zulaso, then the person has, or here, behold, a person has a connection to the other. He's emphasizing the opposite causality, that giving creates the connection, not connection motivates the giving.
What about the taker?
Well, we actually, Kuntras HaChesed is on my list of texts to get to.
Well, you probably have a big list.
Well, I have a list to the foreseeable future, but yes.
Can I suggest?
The taker also, by the way, creates a connection with the other.
Yeah, and how does that fit with the Maharal? How would you put that with the Maharal?
I don't think it's a healthy connection.
I disagree. I think a healthy taker is giving an opportunity to the giver.
Okay, so the Kuntras HaChesed draws a distinction, and maybe that's what I fell into, because I heard Kuntras HaChesed in your words, and you're not necessarily talking his jargon. But what I hear when I said that, when you say taker, is taker in contrast to recipient.
No, I meant recipient. I didn't mean.
I understand that. I understand that. But Rav Dessler makes a distinction, because a good recipient is a giver,
right,
in his book.
Okay,
but a taker is not.
Right.
I mean, that's just his lingo. So yeah, I mean, the Rav Dessler makes the point you're making. But the point I was trying, the way Rav Shimon deals with this, is that Rav Shimon talks about self-love, and V'ahavta l'recha kamocha in Rav Shimon Shkap's Hashkafa is very literal. So a person starts with self-love, and God created us that way, and he's against the idea of selflessness and trying to deny that self-love. He doesn't think it's healthy. He doesn't think it's possible. Instead, what you do is you invest in other people. And when you invest in other people and you see them in yourself, you see yourself in them, you see, their success is partly dependent on you, then you love them as an extension of yourself. Kamocha. There's a lot more to say on that, but we'll maybe someday when it's old hat, we'll just learn that text directly. I have some things to say on that one, but
fair enough.
But that's how he works with this. That the chibur is actually because I see my investment in you, so now my love of myself is expressed also in loving you. The famous Rabbi Yisrael Salanter story is about the person smoking on the train. If anybody not know the reference?
Me.
Okay. Sorry to those who've not only heard it but heard my version before.
You can tell me later if you want.
No. So at one point in his life, Rabbi Salanter smoked, and he eventually gave it up because he didn't like the whole concept of being addicted. But in those days, remember, smoking was good for digestion and healthy, and so he smoked. So when he needed to ride a train to Vilna, his son-in-law, he smoked, went in a smoking car and smoked on the train. And this bacher sits down next to him, this young guy, sits down next to him and starts complaining about the smoking. And so first Rabbi Yisrael opens the window and puffs his cigar out the window, and that's too no good. And the guy complains the whole trip. Eventually, he puts the cigar out. Although, really, I mean, there were smoking cars and non-smoking cars, even in the Jewish, the ghetto section of the trade. Right? He had a non-smoking option. He just was. That's where he was. They get to the station, and the guy's mortified. Right, because there he is. He heard that the guy who was driving crazy was the Rav Yisrael Salanter. At this point, that's a big deal, and this guy is just some schnook starting out. So he asked for apologies, and Rav Yisrael said, "Of course, I forgive you. Like whatever. What are you in town for?" I said, "Well, I'm here in town to take a test to become a shochet. I need to be certified." So. So Rav Yisrael said, come back and let me know how it goes. So he comes back a couple of days later. He failed the test. Rav Yisrael said, okay, my son-in-law is a shochet. He's in town. He'll teach you. He'll coach you. He'll teach you the practice. I'll teach you the theory. And between the two, you'll be able to, you'll pass the test. So Rav Yisrael Salan, they invest, I don't know how much time, but significant amount of time because, this isn't learning, a single, it's a big subject, right? And, eventually he passes the test. So he, after he passes the test, he thanks Rabbi Yisrael. He says, it's so nice of you to do this for me. Rabbi Yisrael says, you have to understand, when you asked me to forgive you, I said I forgave you, but I wasn't sure I really did. And I figured that if I did a favor for you, then we'd have a true connection and the forgiveness would be complete. So that was the that was the story of Rabbi Salanter. So anyway,
you're saying that this fits very well with the two with this concept of connection. You do a chesed to somebody, makes a connection to him.
Right. So that was where we were going with this. Right. Kasher Adam oseh chesed mizulaso, harei yesh lo chibur el zulaso, ubzeh ha'adam asher baro Hashem yisbarach. Yes.
I've noticed also that if you do a chesed to somebody, it also makes you feel, I don't know, makes everyone feel that way, but it makes me feel that way. You're responsible for them.
I hear that.
At least parts of them, the parts connected, not everything, but
right.
I think it's the same thing. If you have a connection to something, you feel responsible for it.
Right. I saw it as the yeah. So the I was going to rephrase what you said and saw no point, so I stopped myself. Anyway, so that's but he's emphasizing that direction, and then the next phrase he emphasizes, so he's making sure you realize the godless Adam of the person you're doing the favor for. You're not just doing a favor for another, connecting to another person, you're connecting to another person that God created. Again, this is the third time he says this. Person was not created to be alone in the world. And this is seen when a person does a chesed for someone else. You shouldn't say that I have no business with others. And these things are self-explanatory. Kfar bi'arnu halashon she'amar ha'olam omed v'lo ha'adam omed ki adam yisod v'amud kol ha'olam k'mo she'amarnu. And the world, this is the world stands and not a person stands, because a person is the foundation and the pillar for the whole world, as we have said. So this is what he's saying here is there are three pillars in a person. The three pillars, there are three kinds of good in a person. All these kinds of good are kinds of relationship. These kinds of relationship are what Hashem created us for. So he created you. The fact that he created you creates a relationship with the creator. And the fact that he created you in a world that has other people and created the other people means that your relationship with the other people is also intimately tied to creation. And I think he is using this to buttress what Bjorn Ha'olam Omed and not Ha'adam Omed. That these three relationships are fundamental to how the world was created. Now, Yud is going to really blow you away. He has another three to introduce us to. Oh, before I go to Yud, good place to pause. Anybody been holding their tongue because they didn't want to interrupt me?
Not me, I had no problems.
No. The whole point of the Cloys metaphor is that it should be the kind of place where nobody feels like this is a lecture and you can't interrupt, and it's supposed to be a little more camaraderie than that. But Cindy raised her hand anyway.
So, yeah, I probably will for a while. It's hard to break the habit. So maybe I'll ask what might be a novice question with the text, but I'm going to ask it because it'll help me to move forward. So is implicit in what we're reading the idea that each individual was made to fulfill their own purpose? Like, where do we get that idea that each individual has a uniqueness and a purpose that needs to be fulfilled? Is that just part of what is implicit in everything that's being said so far? Or will that be something that will be looked at in a little bit more of a concrete way later on?
I don't think this Maharal actually gets there.
Okay.
Because he's trying to get to human nature and how that justifies existence.
Okay.
And why three pillars. Other than the fact that three pillars is the least that a three-dimensional object could rest on. I mean, there's no bipods. I mean, they're called us. It requires a very clever balancing system. But yes, right. Tripods are the norm. But you're right. So that's really what he's focusing on. But the fact that a person exists in and of themselves and not only in relationship to others may be used in that direction, but he doesn't. I mean, to be totally honest, we're just looking at what kinds of relationships there are and not that each person exists in relation to a different set of people and contexts.
Okay.
Okay, it's not where he's going.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. We have three people without their cameras on, so if they're trying to get my attention, they have to unmute. Okay, I'll go on then. From the things which we have explained, we can understand what Chazal said in Sanhedrin. All the mitzvahs in the Torah, a person should rather commit the Avera rather than get killed. Chutz, except me'avodah zara, gilui arayos, u'shvichas damim. These three Averos, right? Avodah zara, gilui arayos, is some subset of sexual sins. Not all of them are actually Yehareg Val Yavor, and Shvichas Damim and murder. This is actually tied to the three pillars. Ki af im nasnu chachamim Svara l'shvichas damim. Even though Chazal gave a reason for shvichas damim. Demai chazis the dama didach sumak tefei. Who said that your blood is redder? So that is the Gemara. That's the Gemara's idiom. So even though the Gemara justifies a hareg val yavor because somebody's going to have to die, and why should it be them and not you? Right? How could you save yourself at somebody else's expense? Dilma the chaverchas mitfei, because maybe his blood is redder. Avogili arayos lo nitnutam. They didn't give a reason for gili arayos, for sexual immorality. Rakti alfinam and krad. They just derive it from a pasuk. Kedisa b'makomo. Look, go look. Avotam davar zeh ki elu. What is the tam? What's the rationale? Ki elu gimel averos heim hefach elu gilvel dvarim shalom omerahem. These three averos are the antonyms, the opposites of the three things that the world stands on. Can't safek. Nobody's going to have any doubt. Ki avoda zara hefach avoda shehi el Hashem yisbarach. Right? He doesn't need to explain. Avodah zarah is the opposite of worshiping God. Shvichas damim he hefech gemilas chasadim, and murder is the opposite of being nice to other people. Kizem meitiv lacher, because gemil chasadim is good for the other. Voselo davar she'ein tzarich lasos, does for him something he's not obligated to do, not necessary. Shvichas damim mavdo legamri, and shvichas damim destroys him entirely. Gili arayos. I'm surprised that needed explanation, by the way. Gili arayos hu hefach haTorah. This he's going to have to spend time explaining. How sexual immorality is the opposite of Torah. He already laid the groundwork with what we saw last week when he talked about Torah in terms of divine wisdom being what lifts us out of animal mode. Ki kvar be'arnu lamala, ki malas haTorah shehi haseichel nivdal min hachomri legamre. The loftiness of the Torah, which is the mind, nivdal min hachomri legamre, is totally separated from the physical. Vein davar shal yado ha'adam nivdal min hachomri, and nothing else, through nothing else, can a person get separated from the physicality. Rakal Yedei HaTorah Hasiklis, except through the Torah, which works on the mind. The Ein Tzarich Lezeh Raya, that doesn't need proof. The Hefech Zeh Gilui Arayos, the opposite is therefore sexual immorality. Shalei Chachar Nus Haguf. We're taking the amendments of the editor, which follows the nus of the body, right? So therefore, shehi gilei arayos. So therefore, gilei arayos it's hedonistic. It's all material. It's the lack of monogamy that's an animalistic trait. It's just responding to the urge. In this way, he's responding to his hormones. I mean, his physicality. Acho nechshav legamre kamo behema v'chamor. Like a behema is a domesticated animal and a donkey. Chamor, by the way, is a very important word. We're going to see it all over the Gra, because chamor and chomer is a wordplay that the Gra likes. I can't believe when he says that he too wasn't noting chamor and chamri and chamor there. He amruzal. More than that, we'll analyze with the Gra, because the Gra spends time on the metaphor. Ki amruzal, ki masa znus hu masa behema. That prostitution or inappropriate sex is the act of an animal. B'mesechta sota, b'mnei karbana shel sota ma'achal behema. Why is the sacrifice of a sota that of an animal? He explains what he means here. Shehu minas orim, because it's barley.
Why is it animal feed?
Yeah, sorry, machal behema, the food of an animal. Did I translate that wrong?
They said, why is it an animal? So no.
Okay.
So is
That
any
of an
food.
animal. Yeah, whatever. It says
There you
machal
go.
behema in the actual words. I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
missed.
Sorry. Whatever.
It's fine. Shumin asorim, because barley is considered a lower grade grain than wheat, and it's animal food. I keep on clicking that and making that thing move in. L'davar zeh ein tzarich raya. Therefore, her carbon is the carbon of an animal, because the sota is being, well, more than accused. She, after being warned, gave her husband grounds to continue believing she was having an affair. So there's something wrong, even if it wasn't an actual affair. I mean, she had a paramour, if even if it wasn't physical yet. So therefore, her carbon is that of an animal. The carbon is the food of an animal. Again, he says, doesn't need proof. Ruzal. So now it says Medrash Tanchuma Naso Ki Sishteh. Lama Nemar, when the woman drinks, this is still in Sota. Lama Nemar, Lalamed She'im min Afim, Minu Afim, Ad Sheyikanes Behem Ruach Shtus. So the Sishteh, it's punning with the word Shtus, meaning, Shtus, I mean, craziness, whatever, stupidity, foolishness, that's the right word. People who are immoral are not immoral until a spirit of foolishness enters them. Adkan. Person only commits extramarital sex when a foolish spirit enters them. Before I go to the Shu Kamo Behema, notice that he's making this is again the opposite of Torah. Because Torah is internalizing divine wisdom, and here he's saying the mind is busy in shtus. Shehu kamo behema balas chomer. It's like a behema, which is a physical master of physicality, a subject of physicality. Vaz yesh niyuf. And then there's immorality. Leficha chaznus shel gilu yarayos hu hefech madregas haTorah. Therefore, the znus of gilu yarayos is the opposite of the level of the Torah. She Torah siklis, because Torah is of the mind, but znus masa chomri, and the znus is of the physical. Therefore, in all three, it is appropriate that a person should choose to be killed rather than violate the commandment. Since a person is sustained through these three things that are being changed, the three things that the world stands on. Through their opposite, a person has no existence. If a person chooses to, if a person wants to commit the sin and not get killed, it says it's still as though a person has no existence. And it's better that they die while they're still have merits, and not die while they're in debt. I like that. I like that very literal translation of chayav there, but chaim, he deserves punishment. John.
Yeah. No, just
okay.
I don't know if it's a place to say something or not. I was just thinking before that the Maharal seems to be in explaining the problem with Gilead Arayos and his three things is basically opposing mind and body rather than say soul and body, which might be an opposition in other contexts. Also, I'm thinking it sort of foreshadows like Freud, right? You got the id, which is the bodily urges, and then you've got the superego, which is the society rules, the Torah that tells you how to actually behave.
Okay, I want to deal with the Freud thing, but I have
Yeah.
enough to say that I want to wait till the end of the paragraph.
Yeah.
Um,
Sorry.
No, that's fine. You
That's
didn't
why I
know
asked.
that I
Yeah.
that I had a long thought on the subject.
Yeah.
Okay. Cindy's raising her head again. Yeah.
I just want to ask one simple question. There's so much written about the idea during the Spanish Inquisition about and the period of time preceding that people who could not give up their life chose not to be able to do that for whatever reason. Aren't, I thought, judged, at least maybe it's just by man, as not being sinners. I don't. So I'm having a little bit
Okay.
hard.
I think the Maharal is actually saying that,
Oh, okay.
and I was going to make that point actually.
Okay. So then I'll wait.
Because look,
that
look, the im
very-
yirtze lav or valye hareg. If a person wants that, Hari al kol panim nechshav kilu ein la adam etzios. He is al kol panim. He doesn't say like the person shouldn't have any. Still, even though he made that choice, he's thought as though he has no existence. Like, I think that choice is valid, and the person is described having made that choice. He's described as being Zakai, right? He's just saying that the person's better off. He considers it the wrong choice, but he doesn't actually say it's prohibited. This is a machlokas rishonim, by the way, whether Yehareg Val Yavor is obligatory or it's the only situation in which it is permitted to choose. In other words, what's the point of Yehareg Val Yavor? Because if we go to the top where we looked at the quote, it said all the sins are Yavar Val Yehareg except for these three. So is he saying these three? We showed him take this two different ways. One way is saying it is that in these three, you're allowed to choose death. You wouldn't be punished for suicide. And then the other would be, in these three, you're supposed to choose death, and it's taken as an obligation. In the case of the Inquisition, it gets even more complicated because there are other times other than these three where a person's supposed to choose death. And one of them is during persecution, during Shmad. Forced conversion is itself, right? Even if they tell you to change your color of your shoelace, right? So that case becomes more what's called. But I think from the Maharal's wording, I think he's leaning towards saying that it's permissible and the right choice, but not obligatory. But I could be wrong. I mean, I'm reading a lot into his using the words afal gav. No, afal p. Afal gav is later.
It says v'im yirtza lav val yihareg. V'im yirtza.
Yeah, right. Which
Right.
doesn't sound like
That's the opposite side. Yeah, it's like his
he
choice.
does. Yeah, but he does. Right, he doesn't phrase it like if this person sins by doing it and not getting killed. Like Hare al Kolpanim, like his whole phrasing is not condemnatory of the person. And then he says that the person at the moment that he's sinning is, I don't know. I'm reading too much.
I think I missed a bit, so I apologize if I said something that people said. But I think if a person was purely unemotional, purely logical, and believes in God and the Torah, then he can't ever sin, right?
Except by making mistakes. And
So they make
that's
an error of judgment.
right.
But
That's how the
talking-
Rambam explains the first sin.
Right. So then over here, that's why that's now the if immorality or promiscuity is going to be the biggest the nth degree of emotional attachment to a person's urges, then that is the exact opposite to the pure intellectualism that non-sinning Torah life would require. I think that's what he's saying.
I don't like the idea of identifying spirituality with intellect, because then Yiras Hashem and Avas Hashem become concessions to the body.
He says seichel. He says seichel.
Yeah,
That's what it-
but you're taking seichel to mean what a 20th, 19th or 20th century person would after the Haskalah and so on. Seichel, I feel that was wrong, and I tried arguing against it in the opening, that when you deal with Deya being of a Haskell, seichel is the ability to take what you know and bring it to the real world. It's not the knowing. It's not the abstract. Maharal is not on the same
You're not-
page as the Rambam, that like, if you know more metaphysics, you'll never sin. Like,
the context of what we're talking about doesn't matter. You can use your definition, which now I'm remembering you mentioned last week, and I didn't realize what you're trying to exclude from. But the even if according to that, you're saying that seichel is taking knowledge and bringing it into practice. Well, not sinning or doing the right thing is taking knowledge and bringing it into practice. It's still the same thing for the purpose of this
No,
Maharal.
I just don't
Yeah.
think it's an unemotional process. In other words, I think seichel is also the seat of some of the emotion. Like, he's distinguishing between a person who has a taiva to, I don't know. Let's pick my usual, to eat chocolate cakes, right? Or somebody who has a taiva to, to finish another sefer, or to, there's a difference. That they're both taiva. They're both emotional drives. Right? Just one is an intellectual, one is a desire. In other words, there's a difference between man's search for food and man's search for meaning. But they're both searches, and I think that both involve emotion. So I disagree. I don't need to convince you. I mean, this isn't like it isn't like you just disprove my whole thesis if I accept what you said. I just don't see it that way.
I'm willing to think about this.
Okay.
Okay.
No, because I think they're positive midos, and he's talking about good versus bad, right? It just doesn't fit. Okay, anyway. Even though it is by accident or by compulsion in this case, because he just said volume is chayiv. Oh, I skipped one. Because it's the opposite of good. Kilo is klal. It's as though it has no existence. And even though it is by accident, but in this case by compulsion, ones is a broader term than accident. Mikol makom, keep on doing that. You guys must be getting seasick. Mikol makom kivan she'elu dvarim notim min hametzius lagamrei. Since these things pull away from mitzius, from existence altogether, lo shaykh lomar v'chai bahem. Therefore, it's not appropriate to say v'chai bahem. You should live through them. The standard pasuk for for lo sheyamus bahem, and don't die. Ki pe'elu gimel averos hu etzem hamisav ha'eder. Because in these three mitos is the essence of death and nothingness and non-existence and lack. Ki ein bahem mitzius shu achiyus klal. These are the darkness. They are the things that exist by Eder, by the absence. Vidavar zemavor. And this is understood. What?
I thought Eder was a fence, so Edar would be like separating yourself from polite society, Torah society.
Oh,
never mind.
No, you could be right, but Jordy's not here to correct my Hebrew, so we're stuck.
Okay. Oh, I saw his gray head. I saw his gray head earlier.
Yeah, he dropped off.
Okay.
Umizet teda. From this you'll know. Ki bedor hamabel. In the generation of the flood, no necher of ha'olam ad shecha. Oh, this is a new topic, and I promised a detour into Freud in the middle. So I want to discuss Hanna-Barbera before I discuss Freud. So Hanna-Barbera, yeah, they're the people who made the Flintstones, and it's done in a lot of TV shows. But my childhood memory was Fred Flintstone. So Fred Flintstone had a hard decision to make, and so popped on each of his shoulders was a little miniature Fred Flintstone, right? One with a halo and one with a pitchfork, horns. You know, this is a standard metaphor. You see it all over it happens to Darren in more than one episode of Bewitched. This is standard, cartoon has to choose between, Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara. But if you think of those pictures, there's three faces in the picture. Right? There's the miniature on each shoulder, and then there's the person themselves. We humans see ourselves as the center of dialectics. Sorry for the fancy words. I spent too many years in YU. But the what's it called? We feel ourselves tugged. We're very aware of thought when we have a decision to make and we're tugged in two directions. So humans see ourselves in a very three-oriented way. So three becomes like the standard way to model the human condition. And then it becomes what dialectic, what's your thesis, what's your antithesis, and what's your synthesis? Or maybe it's not a synthesis. Maybe it's just the point the engine has to churn the two ends and you never really reach a combination, but so Freud, it was, your id wants to do one thing, your parents and your whatever in your environment recorded another set of things, and that tension between them, you get an ego that has to decide between them. Right? In transactional psychology, it's parent, adult, child. Right? We in Kabbalah, again, we're skipping ahead to the Gra for a second. There's Naran, where the Ruach exists in tension between the Nefesh and the Neshama. Don't worry about that if you don't know it, because that's where the Gra goes. And what's it called? It just means that you have to stay long enough to finish the Gra. But the idea is that I think the idea that a human being comes in three is so much part of the human condition that we shouldn't be surprised that when you want to model the human condition, the number three comes up. Whether it's Freud, whether it's Kabbalah, or whether it's Shimon HaTzadik. That's kind of my opinion. A la Fred Flintstone. So that's that's I think where you get this. I'm not sure that his dialectic lines up exactly with Freud's. I mean, it's closer to Freud than some other ones because the id is very animal and hormone driven, but the superego is not spiritual. I think that was Freud's basic problem, because he wasn't from. He didn't have a spiritual world. I don't mean he didn't have one personally. I mean, his model of human couldn't be somebody torn between this world and a spiritual world, or torn between their presence in this world and their presence in a spiritual world. Instead of having a higher calling, he has you replaying the recordings that your society plugged you with. And so much of his treatment involves the fact that the real you is an animal. And the good you is being imposed from the outside. So I think that was his problem, and psychoanalytic theories after him kind of deal with it better. Obviously, Viktor Frankl, who talks about people having an inherent search for meaning, and the lack of meaning is when you fall apart. But in general, I mean, as I said, the Adler makes it the adult and the child versus a child. The child could be a little more animalistic, but it's not that animal versus recording, and it's not even the animal versus soul. So maybe he's not a good example. Are we ready for Yud Aleph, or somebody want to? Okay. Poor Moshe. He's gonna miss his big chance to ask a question. Mizet Teda ki bedor hamabul lo nechrav haolam ad shechatu b'chol eila shlosha devarim sha'olam omed aleihem. I think I'm gonna just skim Yud Aleph, because the Mabul is interesting, but it's just one example, and not necessarily the most life relevant. He explains the Mabul that as having all three. In that, I mean, everybody talks about the fact that that humans and consequently animals got rid of lost their monogamy, and the Maharal uses this pasuk, v'nei nishchasa. V'nei nishchasa, he proves from other psukim, mean in Dvarim here it's used for pen tashchisim v'asisim l'cham pesel, lest you be destructive and make yourself an idol, tunas kol, or in the image of something. Arayos, he takes kihishchis kol basaris darko, which is actually about the Mabul. And he says that shows that they destroyed those two Amudei Olam, and Vatimalehu Haretz Hamas shows that the theft was the destruction of Gemilas Chasadim. And therefore, the humans destroyed our three pillars, and the world had to be destroyed, not just people, which ties Yud Aleph to Yud. I want to more look at the next three, because I think that's more relevant to our lives. It's an interesting proof text that he tries to make the Mabul a proof of his point. But let's go on to Yud Beis. Va'od yesh lecha lahavin. You also have to understand Perish HaMishnah Azos, the explanation of this Mishnah. Ki hamevin shorish v'amitas hadvarim. Somebody who understands the root and the truth of these things, Yavin hakol inyan echad, will understand that it's all one. This is why I skipped, because I wanted to get to this today. Rak kadei sheyevar lecha halashon v'yoser barar masha omer al shlosha devarim ha'olam omed. It'll explain in clearer language what it says that the world stands on three things. Yesh lecha ladas. You have to understand. Ki olam hazeh shebara HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This world that God made, it could not stand on its own. Something you mentioned before. It's only through HaKadosh Baruch Hu from whom comes everything. And again, I have no idea if he means this in the Hasidic sense or the Maimonidean sense, but it works either way, so I guess everybody should be able to buy into this sentence. Ushlosha Dvarim Tzarich al ha'olam ad sheyesh lo kiyum va'amida min Hashem Yisbarach. And the world needs three things in order for it to have sustenance and standing from Hashem. V'zeh ki olam hazehu tzarich letuvo u'lechasdo. The world needs his good and his chesed. Dahainu al hashbaso Yisbarach. It needs hashpah from him, right? You need to get that divine emanation flow going. Ki achar shenivra, after it is created, tarech ha'olam sheyushpa mimenu parnasa olam mikiyumo. Right? We're not deists. The world needs to continue getting Hashem's sustenance in order to, right? It has to get shefa, hashpa'ah, from Hashem in order to continue getting, well, Parnasat ha'olam is not really the prosperity of the world, the sustenance of the world and its existence. V'od kiyum ha'olam, what more? Kasher ha'olam hu nivra la'avod Hashem Yisbarach. The world was created to worship Hashem. Ki im lo haya zeh shenivra lavod Hashem Yisbarach. If it wasn't made to serve Hashem Yisbarach, b'zeh kol ha'olam chelak gavoha, and this in the world is a lofty, piece. Im kain ein roy habriya la'olam. The world would not be deserving of its existence. Ki davar mechuyev hu ubaror. It is necessary and clear that nothing should be except for him. Again, that sounds very Hasidish. The world was created to serve Hashem, that the whole world was a piece from above. And through this, there's existence of the world. Asher nivra lavoda so yisbarach. Ki b'zeh nechshav she'ena olam yotze min Hashem yisbarach kasher nivra lavoda so yisbarach. If we want to get from him, right, then we should be serving him. Ki b'zeh nechshav. Through this is thought that the world doesn't come out of Hashem.
He means come out like diverge, right?
What?
Means it like diverge, right? Like separated. A separate.
Yeah, I was going to say this. I think that he is saying something that is actually straight out of the Rambam, even though it sounds like Kabbalistic phrasing. The Rambam talks about the Navi getting more hashgacha pratis because he says, Chazal say, this is Mar Nevuchim, Chelek Gimel, Perek Yud Ches. So in Yud Zayin, he gives 5 different theories for divine providence. The last one he says is Chazal's. And he says Chazal say that all human beings get divine providence. Individual hashgacha pratis, individualized providence. So the species of lions get hashgacha, but the individual human gets hashgacha as well. Not the species of humanity as a whole, each person. Then the Rambam hedges that in Perek Yud Ches. And he says, well, there's no such thing really as a species. Sets are kind of fuzzy. Like you have the class of all, I don't remember his examples. I'll take red objects. And then you have things that are kind of reddish, right? That are in the set, they're a little bit not in the set. So the same thing's true of people. People are capable of thought. So the more das a person has, the more they belong to the set of people that Chazal are talking about. He doesn't actually claim that Chazal say this. He actually says he's diverging, but he's diverging by saying that their concept should mean this, right? And therefore, the more one knows of Hashem, the more hashgacha pratis they get. So I hear that here. The more we serve Hashem, it's not knowledge here, it's avoda, so it's not exactly the same thing, but it's the same idea that by building a connection to Hashem, that is your means of getting that shefa from HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
But really, his point is the opposite, that if you don't make a connection to Hashem, then you don't deserve to exist, you being the entire universe.
Well, he says
And
both.
he says that. I'm saying, but that's
He says
the main
both.
point.
I mean,
He's
first he says al hain, and then he says al lav.
Yeah, but I'm saying like the context of Mabel and all that. You need. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just
Okay. Right, but I think right. So I actually see in this, if we're gonna resume the discussion of how intellectual is the Maharal being, how much of an intellectualist is the Maharal being, the fact that he talks about avoda and the Rambam talks about yediyah is telling. He's talking about relationship with Hashem, not knowledge of Hashem. Or the way there's a saying, I don't know if it's still there because I went to YU in the 80s and I'm sure they redecorate. I hope they redecorated since. But there's a quote from Rabbi Belkin that was in huge like a metal fixture on the wall. It, not about it. And he wanted that why you teach Torah, not about Torah. Right? The Rambam didn't make that distinction. The Rambam, knowing about God is knowing God. But Avodas Hashem as the focus is knowing God the way I know Moshe Yehuda Gluck, not knowing about God. Like I don't know that much of your biography. So I don't know that much about Moshe Yehuda Gluck, but I feel like I know Moshe Yehuda Gluck very well. Okay, so I think that's, and it does, and despite what I said earlier, it does touch on my thesis, because my thesis is that he's focusing on yachas, not on knowledge, right? And the Torah is a yachas to your better self, and this is your yachas to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I mean, it's possible that's your yachas to wisdom, but I don't know. I mean, okay, maybe it doesn't really make my point. Maybe my point survives even if you're right. Another thing which exists in the world, the perfection, the completeness of the world. It's not, void and emptiness or lack. Because if the world was a lacking existence, like what I called a darkness, a thing that exists by something being absent, it would have no existence at all. That the world was created to serve Hashem, and also that it is created whole and not lacking. Because when Hashem brings down his shefa of loving kindness and good, therefore, corresponding to this, it says ala Torah. Kikim ha'olam ba'atzmo hu Torah. The existence of the world itself is like we explained before this. Kishleimus ha'olam hu b'shvil Torah. The wholeness of the world is for the sake of Torah. Komosha ramaz gam bikra yom hashishi. This is a famous drasha because Rashi says it. It says in the pasuk at the end of creation or the beginning of Kiddush, yom hashishi. Ramuzal Chazal say, no. So the question was, why hashishi? Why not shishi, sixth day? Oh, sixth day. What's the sixth day? The sixth day is the 6th of Nisan. So Hashem made creation conditional. It would sit and wait until the 6th of Sivan, 33 something. I don't remember what year it was. If the Jews accept the Torah, great. The world would return to chaos and emptiness and chaos. Although how emptiness could be chaotic is its own philosophical discussion. But davar zeh ki lefchisas ha'olam im lo haya ba'olam Torah lo haya nechshav ha'olam l'klum. When I prepared this, I remembered what pchisas was, and now I'm blanking. Let's ask for help. It didn't work. I saw the little, what's it called? I saw the little, I could do it here. What does Google say? Reduction. Oh, pachos. That's why it was a word I'd know. Okay. If the world were lessened, if the world were just reduced by not having Torah, the world would be of nothing, of no value. Kimahu. What would it be? right? So it's like, it's like a person without a soul. It's like, what is it?
Is he
It's
saying
not a
that
person at all.
Is he saying that even if you have the other two Amudim, if you don't have the Amud of Torah, then the world can't last? That's what it means chisas, that's lessening, but it's not, you didn't get rid of the rest, right? That's what I'm understanding. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, except I thought he meant the rest, like if you had humanity and you had flowers and you had everything that exists in the world except the Torah, that one reduction would make the Torah nothing, would make the world nothing. And then he's going to say the same thing about the other two pillars. You could be right that if he had he's definitely saying that each of the pillars is a necessary precondition for the world to exist.
Well, that's the Reb Chaim Volozhiner, right? That if there's somebody not learning at any moment in the world, then it would cease to exist.
Yes, except Rav Chaim Volozhiner. Okay, let's get to the end of the paragraph.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay.
You look like you're ready to jump. You have something to say.
Yeah, well, that's when I realized that, like, I may be starting a whole discussion, and so maybe we should finish the paragraph first.
Let's hit the paragraph.
Okay.
Okay.
Can I ask one question? When I was reading this, not reading ahead and thinking about it, I listening to you, is he speaking about this is, for example, this first line before we get to the other two, this is what happened with Noah, with Noah's generation, that this is where they were at this chaotic pre-creation state because they didn't have Torah? No, this is not linked to the above description of the destruction of the.
Well, it's sort okay. You see, I see a fundamental difference, and that is when he talks about the flood, he talks about the fact that they destroyed all three things, so they had no right to continue existing. Here he's talking not any one of the three.
Oh, see.
And he makes a point of showing you that it's all three.
Yes, gotcha.
Right. Whereas here,
he's going through each one
he's going through each one, and he's saying the world wouldn't have been created to begin with.
Yeah.
As opposed to now that it exists, having one, it could hang on for a while, while the other two catch up.
Or
like
build,
the Torah,
or build up,
like it did for 2,000 years before the Torah was given.
Right. Okay, gotcha.
Therefore, the world would return to Tohu Vavohu if it wasn't for the Torah. It's the significance and the loftiest level of the world. Because through it, the world deserves to exist. In any case, it should now be, fully explained that the world that Torah is a pillar of the world, like we said already. So, what I wanted to say about the what's it called? About Nefesh HaChaim. First of all, I'm not really sure that Nefesh HaChaim is a complex book because it's a bunch of notebooks that his son put together into one text by his request. We don't really know. I wonder, let's put it this way. I wonder if the notebook about, so the first section talks about mitzvos of action. The second section talks about tefillah. So you have a section about Maaseh, about Dibur, and about Machshava. I skipped the third section and the chapters, as they call them. Chapters are about what's the Yetzer Tov, what's the Yetzer Hara. It may be more of a preface to the fourth section, because the fourth section is about what's it called. The third section is totally different. It's theological. It's not man's place in the world. It's about how God created things. Talking about Tzimtzum and that kind of thing. But in any case, I'm not sure if he really, how much of it was when he wrote about Torah was everything. When he wrote about Tefillah was everything. And when he wrote about, I don't know, because they were written separately. But either way, he does, if we do understand the father of the yeshiva movement that way, and he was the father of the yeshiva movement, so it's fair to assume that he considered learning very, uniquely central, not just quantitatively central, but qualitatively central, right? He's also the father of the Muslim movement. They didn't split yet in his day. But either way, that the world of the mind is central, or the world of the emotion, what goes on in here is central. He's putting one of the pillars more fundamental than the other two. It gets into the question we had last week of, is Torah? I don't have your phone, Shubes, and I'm in the middle of something else. I don't have your phone. I'm sorry. So in the middle of, sorry about that. Now to get the train of thought. Yeah. So last week we were discussing whether the Maharal was, from the two proof texts. It wasn't the Maharal. The two proof texts was it saying that the crown of Torah is necessary in order to get the other two, or greater than the other two. Here, what we're saying is it's he makes it the point of the other two. Like the Tachlis is Torah. Torah keeps the world going in a way that the other two pillars don't. I mean, he doesn't divide into these three pillars. He divides into action, speech, and thought. But by placing thought central, he's putting Torah ahead of mitzvos beinam l'makom and ahead of mitzvos beinam l'chavero.
Well,
It's
it makes
not
sense
a
because-
tripod.
It makes sense because don't forget, the person's relationship with himself is necessary for existence. You could not have a relationship with Hashem, and you could not have a relationship with others. But if you don't have a relationship with yourself, you don't really exist. And that's the exact parallel he draws to Torah. He says, when you don't learn Torah, you don't really exist. Or the world doesn't learn Torah. The world doesn't really have the ability to exist. It doesn't.
Right,
it's
but
not-
it doesn't say that if the world doesn't have people davening, the world doesn't exist.
Right. I'm saying
He says the world. In other words, he's not making Torah valuable because more valuable than the other two pillars because the other two pillars are preconditioned on Torah. He's making it uniquely a unique kind of pillar of the world.
yeah. But again, I think that the relationship with yourself is more fundamental than the relationship with anyone else.
Right? No, that I
Right, so
agree,
it's-
but I don't
right.
think he's saying it's more. I don't think he's stopping at saying it's more fundamental.
Yeah.
I think he's saying it does more to sustain the world than the other two. Not more to sustain the world because it's also necessary for the other two, but all of the chiyus of the world comes from the Torah being studied. I don't know. I mean, maybe we should add Nefesh Chaim to the curriculum eventually.
Okay.
Yeah, that
And
will
I'm
take a
curious to
lot of
see-
work on my part because, I feel, whatever. I've learned it. It's not an easy book. It would take a lot of prep. But yeah, maybe we should. But
Okay.
but I see him as giving priority to one of the three pillars, just like I see Rav Shimon as giving priority to Gemilas Chasadim. Right? He also says Torah is a precondition, but he makes Avoda also a precondition, and that Gemilas Chasadim is the be all and end all.
Well, I just
Right.
skipped a little in the head of the Maharal, and I see he's going to basically say something which I know you saw already, that without Avodah also the world has to be destroyed.
Right. No, he's going to
Right.
tackle all three because
Right.
he's saying each of them are pillars of the world.
Right.
We just stopped at the first one, and I'm saying because he
reason
has a Parakut Gimel, paragraph number that sorry, it's not Parakut Gimel, a paragraph that Safaria decided to number 13. That's all that Yud Gimel is, right?
Right.
But the 13th paragraph, because he has it, I think he differs from Nefesh Chaim.
Okay,
Because then Chaim would stop at 12 and say,
right,
"Oh yeah, and you need the other two because otherwise you wouldn't have the Torah."
right.
You know,
I
like,
hear that.
Yeah.
I hear that.
With that said, I don't think we're going to get to. We're not going to finish 13. So I think I'm going to stop here.
Okay.
Okay.
So what do we
Does
think out of
anybody
this
want to make
tonight?
comments on the record? Should I go off the record?
I'd like to say,
I'd just like to say on the record, I think this is the most confusing paragraph for me of everything we've read, because although the discussion that you're having makes me feel like this should be much clearer to me than it is. I don't necessarily see him in my unsophisticated reading as emphasizing one as being more important than the other.
Oh no. My point was he doesn't.
Oh, okay.
We
because
just
that I
no.
don't
My point was
necessarily
that
see that,
in this paragraph
yes,
he's talking about Torah. In the
yes,
next paragraph, he talks about the other two. In contrast to Rav Chaim Volozhiner, who would only say it about Torah and not the other two. Or if he said it about the other two, he would say it because they're necessary handmaidens of Torah,
yes,
right? And
Right.
therefore, I don't think, even though the point he makes here is the same as the point Nefesh Chaim makes in the fourth section, the fourth shar, I don't think, because he doesn't stop here, I don't think he's saying the same thing.
okay, then that's validating what I'm thinking.
Okay.
as You're reading
Yeah,
it
sorry about that.
without knowing the other text. So I don't have the
well,
background
Cindy,
of the other text that you're talking about.
don't worry, Cindy. Micha just added it to the curriculum.
I know, I eventually will get there, but it gets
I think it was a
confusing.
brilliant idea.
I don't have the yeshiva mind of being able to jump in all those directions without the source in front of me. So thank you, though.
Okay.
Okay, so can I just say on the record or off that it was nice to see Ariel for a minute. Hi, Ariel.
Oh, hi.
Okay, I'm shutting
Thank
off
you.
the screen share so that you can see everybody. I don't actually.
Chodesh Adar Tov to all.
Thank you, and to you as well.
Yeah, so Rav David used to have.
Right back at you.
So I don't know if
ha-
any of you remember this. I mean, I know John does because he lived in a computer room during this period. But back you remember back when they had the tractor feed paper?
Oh
You
yeah.
know, the long sheet, and you had to tear them at the yeah. So there's a program that comes with Unix. Hi. There's a program that comes with Unix called Banner, where you give it text and it prints a huge banner of the text, like 80 characters high, sideways.
I think I did that on Commodore 64.
Yeah. With the right set of flags, right?
Yeah.
So somebody in YU wrote H banner with the Hebrew, that would do Hebrew. And every year, Rav David would have, I mean, the custom is older than Unix. So before that, he had other kinds of posters. But running across the top of the base medrash were three quotes that Rav David decided to connect. The first one was Mishenichnas Adar Marvin Simcha. Second one was Ein Simcha Ela Torah. And the third one was V'chol Amar Behareze Meshubach.
Did it work?
Who knows? I mean, he made a big campaign in the not just among his Talmidim to ratchet up the learning, before Pesach break.
So I wanted to say that I need to make a phone call, so I need to get going. But I was zocha today to process a 16th century manuscript of Rav Yosef Gikatilla's Ginad Egos, which is deep things about the Shem Hashem, way beyond anything where I'm holding. But it's just amazing when Parnassa can intersect Sfarim. I've been at the Library of Congress 6 years, and I'm grateful to Hashem every day.
Wow.
Very good.
Well, I'm a little,
Good.
just a little jealous. Maybe even a lot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we plan, we're digitizing all 230 Hebraic manuscripts at the library. Some of them are already available low resolution. We're gonna digitize them beautiful high resolution. Yirtz Hashem, they'll all be released to the public Erev Pesach 2023. That's what we're aiming
Oh,
for.
wow. Now I'm working on a digitization project now for Agudas Israel's archives.
Ooh.